We're going to move on to Section 3. And the essential questions that we'll talk about in Section 3 are the steps involved in obtaining a contract with a food service management company and how to complete the request for proposal. This flow chart will hopefully help you better understand the steps, and we will review each step in this section. This flow chart is also available on PAIR's form download for you to access at any time. Before or while you are developing the request for proposal or the RFP, you need to identify the evaluation committee. There must be a minimum of 3 people. However, there can be more, but we recommend that it's always an odd number on the committee. And the individuals on the committee must provide a thorough and impartial review of all proposals. Prior to publishing the RFP, an objective scoring system must be developed, and there should be a scoring rubric with criteria, standards, and a place for evaluators to write comments. The standard RFP is the basis for the contract. It is available on the PAIR's form download or the Division of Food and Nutrition website. This slide is instructions on how to obtain it from PAIR's if you have PAIR's access. And the next slide is how to locate it on the Division of Food and Nutrition's Department of Education's website. The Division of Food and Nutrition recommends having us review the RFP before it is published in order to avoid any problems down the road. However, it is not required that we review RFPs. If you do submit the completed RFP to us for review, please make sure it's marked as draft, and you need to include the RFP, the worksheets 1 through 4, and on the projected operating cost, which is worksheet number 5, you'll complete sections 1 through 3, and we'll be reviewing those worksheets in detail later on in the presentation. You'll need to include the 21-day menu, and if you do not include all of these documents, it will slow down the process because we'll need to get in contact with you and obtain those documents from you. So it's important that you submit everything together as a packet if you're requesting us to review it. Allow plenty of time for the Division of Food and Nutrition to review the RFP. Once the RFP is finalized, it needs to be advertised in at least 2 newspapers for at least 3 weeks. This is 1 day each week, and it does not need to be the same day each week. Electronic ads are acceptable. The ad must include the walkthrough date and the submission deadline and how to obtain the RFP. You must also send letters of solicitation to at least 5 vendors from the list of approved vendors, which is available on PAIR's form download or the Division of Food and Nutrition website. Copies of these letters and proof of advertisement should be included with the proposed contract, which we'll discuss in a few slides. The walkthrough must occur at least 2 weeks prior to the deadline of the proposal submission. It is mandatory for all potential bidders. A sign-in sheet is required, and this sign-in sheet will be submitted to the Division of Food and Nutrition with the proposed contract. Questions received prior to the walkthrough should be distributed with answers to all bidders at the walkthrough or shortly thereafter. When the proposals are received at the School Food Authority, they must be time and date stamped. Proposals must not be opened until the public bid opening date. Unsealed proposals or proposals submitted after the due date cannot be accepted. The bid opening occurs at the date specified in the RFP. The only thing presented is the name of the company and the dollar amount of the proposal. The proposals are then distributed to the evaluation committee for review and scoring. The evaluation committee scores each proposal independently. If alternative proposals are accepted, which will be discussed later, they must be scored separately, but also must meet the basic criteria. Any proposal offering services above and beyond what was requested in the RFP may be considered overly responsive and void. For example, if the RFP does not ask for equipment or a breakfast program and a vendor submits a proposal with equipment or breakfast program included, that proposal may be void. The evaluation committee must maintain confidentiality and must maintain thorough documentation throughout the process. This documentation will be used to settle any bid protests if they arise. The documentation remains confidential until the contract is final. Successful bidders should be notified in writing, and unsuccessful bidders should be notified as promptly as possible. The successful proposal should be submitted to the school board for approval. The proposed contract is composed of the RFP, the selected vendor's proposal, and all required worksheets. The proposed contract will be submitted to the Division of Food and Nutrition for approval. We will sign each page and return it with a cover letter. The School Food Authority will then make 2 copies, which is a total of 3 copies, because you have the one that we returned to you, and then you're making 2 additional copies. Each party will sign each copy in blue ink, and it must be blue ink, and return 1 copy to the Division of Food and Nutrition. At that time, the Division of Food and Nutrition checks the signatures and provides final approval. We will note this date, the final approval date, on the PEARS fact sheet, and it will also be noted on the cover page. The Division of Food and Nutrition will not review or sign off on any pages to the contract that are addendums or appendixes or additional pages. The fact sheet in PEARS should be started while the Division of Food and Nutrition is reviewing the proposed contract. Again, this is where we will enter the final approval date. The profit and loss on the fact sheet must match the projected operating cost worksheet. We're going to go through the actual necessities of the standard RFP packet. The first thing is a checklist. It is not part of the contract, just a tool to help keep you organized. All items on the checklist must be submitted or we cannot approve the contract. This includes copies of bid advertisements, letters of solicitation, walkthrough sign-in sheets, bid protest procedures, and a sample invoice from the awarded contract or from the awarded vendor. The RFP is a locked document. Only the gray boxes are fillable. Use the tab button to move from field to field throughout the standard RFP. Once again, the Division of Food and Nutrition will not accept documents that are retyped or changed in any way or added to. The agreement page is the first official page of the contract. This is where both parties will sign in blue ink after the Division of Food and Nutrition reviews the proposed contract and it's returned to the School Food Authority. The contract year is always the school year. These are only 1-year contracts with up to 4 options to renew. Next, we're going to review general information about the standard RFP. The start date of the contract may not always be July 1, but the end date will never be later than June 30th because the contract is always based on the school year. When completing the RFP, the School Food Authority must select if they desire a fixed price contract or a cost reimbursable contract. The School Food Authority must indicate which scoring method will be used. There are 2 methods, but cost is always the primary factor. In the one-step scoring method, the technical portion and cost components are scored at the same time. The School Food Authority can negotiate both components of the contract with vendors that scored above the specified percentage in the RFP. The negotiations must be consistent with the terms in the RFP. For example, if equipment was not requested in the original RFP, this is not the time to see who will provide equipment. When we say that price is the primary factor, that means that points can be assigned to be greater. It can be 50% or more, or can be assigned the greatest number of points. For example, cost is assigned 25 points, while all other criteria is assigned 10 or 15 points. In the 2-step scoring process, the technical proposal is scored and negotiated prior to cost being considered. Once technical proposals are negotiated to equivalency, the bidders submit best and final cost. The award goes to the lowest offer since the technical proposals were deemed equivalent and acceptable. Again, during negotiation, the terms remain consistent with what was established in the published RFP. A bid bond of 5% is required with the proposal. This can take on the forms, it can take any of the forms listed above. It is returned to any unsuccessful bidder. There's an additional information section. This is where the School Food Authority will add information about specifics it may want included in proposals submitted by food service management companies. The School Food Authority may ask for alternative proposals. That would be specified in this section of the RFP. For example, if the School Food Authority does not currently have an after-school snack program, but is considering it, the RFP can request alternative proposals to include the cost and process if the school chose to implement an after-school snack program. Alternative proposals are scored separately from original contracts. Examples of things that school food authorities include in the additional information section include a point of service system, anticipated enrollment changes, anticipated building changes, potential programs to be added, alternate programs, staff changes, questions from all potential bidders, guaranteed returns, equipment costs. Additional examples include things like the School Food Authority currently serves meal to another school at a cost of $2.50 per meal with possible increases next year. Pictures of School Food Authority students, food service staff, food, and the facilities are not permitted during the walkthrough. Food bars will be available every day at the high school. The current district staff, as listed on the labor and fringe benefit sheet, will be replaced with food service management staff as attrition occurs. Again, these are just examples of things that we've seen in the additional information section. If equipment is included as part of their contracts, renewal years cannot be contingent on the equipment being purchased. The School Food Authority must have options such as purchasing the remaining balance of the cost of the equipment, returning the equipment to the food service management company, or paying the equipment off over a term. For example, the balance of the equipment cannot be limited to paying it back upon contract termination, because if the School Food Authority did not have the money to pay the food service management company for the balance of the cost of the equipment, then they would be stuck in the renewal year contract, even if they didn't want to continue with a contract with the food service management company. So the School Food Authority must be provided options for any equipment purchasing terms. The RFP must include a 21-day menu that is developed by the School Food Authority. The awarded vendor will need to follow this 21-day menu for the first 21 days. Changes can be made after the first 21 days if agreed upon by both parties ahead of time. Oftentimes we receive these 21-day menus as part of the draft RFP, and they are developed by the food service management company. So it is important that the School Food Authority develops its own 21-day menu, because if it is developed by the food service management company, that specific management company could be considered not competitive in the procurement process of this particular contract. If the summer food service program is included in the request for proposal, an 11-day menu is required instead of a 21-day menu. And that's in addition to the 21-day menu. Our review of menus does not mean that the school is in full compliance with the respective meal standards. A sample invoice from the awarded vendor must be included. It must demonstrate how the vendor will display itemized rebates, discounts, and credits, as well as the value of donated foods. This is an appropriate time to mention that the food service management company must maintain supporting documentation for each invoice at the School Food Authority site. For example, when the School Food Authority receives the monthly invoice from the food service management company, invoices from supplies, food costs, summary of labor, etc., must be included so the School Food Authority can compare it to the actual cost of the invoice. As mentioned earlier, the contract is a one-year contract with 4 options to renew. The contract can only be renewed if all the terms remain the same. Services cannot be added. The only things that can change is the actual cost. Administrative and management fees are limited to increasing no more than the Consumer Price Index. The methodology and formula for administrative and management fees cannot change, and the criteria for determining any guaranteed return cannot change. There is a standard renewal contract, and no addendums are permitted. To ensure that no language is added that has not been included in the original contract, the Division of Food and Nutrition will develop and issue a standard addendum page and evaluate changes on a case-by-case basis to determine if there is a material change and a need for the contract to be rebid. Next, Carol Levan is going to discuss the required worksheet.
The Average Daily Participation Worksheet, or ADP, is Attachment 1A. The Average Daily Participation Worksheet, or ADP, must be filled out by the School Food Authority. Each site being reported must be listed individually, along with the enrollment and the number of paid, free, and reduced meals by days for lunch, breakfast, snacks, or supplements, a la carte, and or special milk. You will notice that there is a place to list the selling price per student and adult for reimbursable lunches, breakfast, and supplements. If you do not have a fixed price set up for the adult meal and instead they purchase meals from the a la carte menu, you would combine the adult and student average daily participation together and post that total in the a la carte column. The average daily participation, or ADP, worksheet for summer food is separate. That is Attachment 1B. The summer food ADP is a separate worksheet and must be completed by the SFA, listing the name of each site, the enrollment, and total number of meals served for breakfast, lunch, and snacks. You do not have to include this form with your RFP unless you are operating a summer food program. The Cost Responsibility Detail Worksheet is Attachment 2. The Cost Responsibility Worksheet covers costs that have been deemed necessary for the on-site operation of the food service program and are directly incurred for the SFA's operation not provided for under the standard contract terms and conditions. The worksheet must be completed by the SFA prior to issuing the RFP. You would complete the form by placing an X in the appropriate column that the duties are to be assigned. For example, using the Labor for Employees section, if both the SFA and the FSMC are retaining employees, an X would be placed in the SFA and the FSMC columns. If either the SFA or the FSMC are retaining all the employees, an X would be placed in the appropriate column. If any items listed do not pertain to your needs, you would then place an X in the N/A column. Labor and Fringe Worksheet is Attachment number 3. The Labor and Fringe Worksheet lists the site, position, and wages for each staff member. Please indicate at the top of the page by clicking on the down arrow whether the FSMC or the SFA will be retaining the employees. Remember, the selection must match the Cost Responsibility Worksheet as well as page 14, section 12B of the RFP. It also must match direct labor and benefits on the projected operating costs worksheet. If the SFA is retaining the employees, they would then need to complete the worksheet. If the FSMC is retaining the employees, they would need to complete the worksheet. If both are retaining the employees, then each would complete their own worksheet to submit with the RFP. Again, please remember to indicate by the drop-down box whether the employees are being employed by the FSMC, the SFA, or both. Do not use the person's name. Instead, use the position or title. The SFA Site Listing Worksheet is Attachment number 4. The SFA Site Listing Worksheet indicates the site name, address, grade levels, whether the site is self-prep or a satellite site, meaning that the food is prepared off-site but delivered to the school from another site. You also need to list the times that the meals will be served, as well as indicating the FSMC's responsibilities under the services to be provided with an X. If there is no snack or special milk program, You would reference those columns by using N/A. The number of serving days for each site can vary. However, when completing page 12, letter I, for number of feeding days in the RFP, you would use the highest number of feeding days listed on the SFA site listing worksheet. For instance, if you have two sites and one has 180 feeding days while the other site has only 178 days, you would use 180 feeding days as the number of feeding days on the RFP under page 12, section I. Projected operating cost worksheet is attachment 5. There are 4 sections to this. The projected operating cost or POC worksheet breaks down into these 4 sections. Section 1 of the POC is the actual in-school revenue section, also known as SFA budget. This is completed by the SFA. To complete, you would take the estimated meals multiplied by the rates for paid, reduced. To complete, you would take the estimated meals multiplied by the rates for paid, reduced price, adult, and a la carte meals. The paid and reduced price meals must match those entered on the sponsor application in pairs. Meal pricing information. Section 2 of the POC is the federal reimbursement section. This section is completed by the SFA. Here you would enter the expected revenue for projected meals to be claimed. This is comparable to the average daily participation and meal counts for prior years. By referring to your previous year's contract or prior year's claims, it should help you to estimate your count, taking into consideration that there may be slight variations due to changes in sites, such as a school closing or opening, a new school, or the number of children participating in the program. Section 3 of the POC is the state and reimbursement section. This section is completed by the SFA. The meal counts for the state reimbursement must match those of the federal reimbursement counts in Section 2. If the FSMC is crediting the SFA for commodity usage, this should be listed on the line at the bottom of this section. The commodity usage should always be a negative number. Section 4 of the POC is the expenses section. This is to be completed by the FSMC. A separate POC is available and should be filled out for the summer food program. This section is the total expenses that the FSMC will incur for an entire year. Section 1 through 3 equals total revenue. Total cost under direct labor and benefits would equal the total amount listed on the labor and fringe worksheet for those employees that will be employed by the FSMC. The administrative fee and the FSMC fee cannot increase in the renewal year POC higher than the CPI rate. All other expenses incurred by the FSMC can increase higher than the CPI rate in the renewal year if the SFA is satisfied with their justification. Section 4 of this section contains the rebates, discounts, and applicable credits that equals total expenditures. A separate invoice showing how the FSMC will offer the rebates, discounts, and applicable credits to the SFA must be included in the final approved contract. The profit and loss section is the total revenue minus total expenditures. Items marked with an asterisk must be itemized in full detail on the budget summary page. This is to ensure that expenses are not being charged in 2 categories and to transparently evaluate changes to expenses from the original year contract to the renewal year contract.